Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I am your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter, NJH287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. The website where you can find everything is dsmsports.net, and the podcast is available on wherever you like to listen to or watch podcasts. Really excited for the show today. I have been wanting to have this guest on for a long time, been bugging him, and he had just truly delivered a phenomenal interview. So much insight, so much good knowledge. Great anecdotes, great examples. We got to dive into so many different topics. My guest on the podcast today is Nick Kelly. He is the CEO and founder of Encore Sports and Entertainment. He talks about his career journey going from NASCAR to several years at AB InBev with their sports partnerships. Then time as CEO of Charlotte FC as that team was just coming off the ground, coming out of the pandemic, as well as time overseeing the whole Tepper Sports empire with the Charlotte FC and the Panthers, then going to Verizon, and now what he's doing at Encore Sports Entertainment. Just such good insight and perspective on everything sports partnerships, fan development, fan engagement, measuring success. Just a tremendous interview. So here he is, Nick Kelly of Encore Sports and Entertainment. I am back on the podcast with today's guest. I'm so excited. I have been following this guy for years. I feel like I probably was listening or watching him on conference panels for years now, and it's a pleasure to have him on the podcast. He's been at several different places, as we'll talk about, and has a great perspective on the space. My guest today on the podcast is Nick Kelly. He is the founder and CEO of Encore Sports and Entertainment. And welcome to the podcast today, Nick.
Neil, thanks for having us. We really appreciate it.
So psyched to pick your brain. There's so much to learn from you. But before we get into the meat of our discussion, tell us about you. Give us an idea of your career path, your stops along the way, and what you're doing today with Encore. Any tips for folks that want to try to do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, look, I had a pretty interesting career. I mean, I started, probably the first 10 years of my career doing everything I could to try and get into sports. I was working in PR agencies across West Virginia and, Baltimore, and eventually was able to land a job doing business PR at NASCAR, which was, at the time trying to show value to their official partners and, telling their story about how NASCAR is driving their business. Was able to translate that into a PR job at Anheuser-Busch, just, through relationships I'd established at NASCAR, and was still in PR my first year there. And then really just been there, and it's kind of like, what I've been fairly successful at is building trust and establishing the right relationships internally in the PR role, that when they were looking to go a new direction on the sports side, and within relocating to New York, I was offered the opportunity to head up the North American sports division, which, they just assumed with my background in NASCAR, I knew everything. Clearly, that was not the case. But, did that for almost 6 years, and it was awesome. I mean, I learned everything there, from negotiating my first like real team and league contract to players. And, we tried to, with the support of our leadership, do things differently. I mean, I think that the alcohol space and the beer space specifically is constantly challenged. So it was one of those things of how do we get more value out of our partnerships. And when I started, we had 130 partners. I mean, when I left, we were 80 or 90. They're probably still hovering around there, maybe a little bit more, but everything looks different now. I mean, the landscape, how we looked at contracts, we went to an incentive model. We
Yeah.
were able to start marketing players. We kind of gave up rights in the spirit space because we were overpaying to block it for so long. So like it really shifted a lot over that time. And my last couple of years there, I inherited a bunch of other roles just because the same thing, like building up trust internally and clear communication. Ended up taking on the Clydesdales, so managing 80 Clydesdales handlers and
Wow.
140 horses. Took over the zoo, which we had about 700 animals, all that kind of stuff.
Wow, I know
Um,
you.
Licensing, you name it. And it really just became, for us on the marketing side, how do you find, ways to take all the synergies across entertainment is essentially what it was. I also oversaw our Hollywood office, and it was really just how do we take all of the brands that we had, and it was a family of brands, Stella, Bud Light, and really look at a way to expand beyond just above the line social digital. So it was an awesome job. I learned a tremendous amount, not only about the industry, but working within a super complex organization. It was super matrix, global, local problems, not problems, but it wasn't clean. It was a three-tier system. We didn't know the end consumer.
Mhm.
But then through that and being somewhat successful there, was offered the opportunity to start an MLS team with Mr. Tepper.
Yeah.
Did that, man, right in the middle of COVID, and it was learned a ton. I mean, I was one of the first employees on the business side, and we had to stand up a team, which got up to about 80 people. we did everything from selling sponsorships to selling season tickets to you name it. And towards the back half of my first year, I oversaw like the sporting side too, which I probably spent too much time on because like it was fun. It's something I didn't, I never thought I would do, but it wasn't certainly wasn't a distraction. But like, I was super proud of like I wasn't looking to go to the team side. It was more along the lines of being able to do a startup, and that's really what it felt
Yeah.
like was like a startup. Because I mean, we did everything from like finding office space to furniture to all the ticky tacky stuff to you know building a season ticket strategy, selling season tickets from scratch, and we sold more than 20,000 season tickets first year, which, when you put in perspective is almost more than every NBA team, most of the MLB teams. Like, so for us to sell in the middle of COVID for an MLS team, 20,000 plus season tickets is something we were really proud of. But, was had the opportunity to learn from a really smart, experienced leader and a guy named Tom Glick, who'd been at City Football Group and other places. So I also felt comfortable going into the role knowing that like I wasn't flying blind.
Hmm.
And then shortly after that, helped with, trying to merge that and the Panthers together. Learned a lot in that process. Definitely learned a lot too, just more about, I would say just the dynamics of these, especially you see become more visible, these holding company type models where there's multiple teams and everything. And we tried to, and probably improperly, force a single culture across, two distinctly different teams. And one was very established versus one was brand new.
Yeah.
And you see this now is that like, I used to push this in both of my brand side jobs is it's a very great sales pitch when you have a CRO or a sales team come in and they're like, hey, you should buy across our portfolio. But
Hmm.
then when you actually get, inch deep into that conversation, it's not that simple. So, we probably pushed a little too hard trying to make it a one-stop shop. But, it's just one of those things that it still is something all of the industry is trying to push for. But it's hard. I mean, the dynamics are different between the NFL and the NBA. And if you have a European club, it's a whole lot different. So learned a lot there. From that point on, like I thought I wanted to start an agency. Like I really was just like, all right, like, I've got enough background, talked to a lot of people I trust. They were like, you're gonna be a bigger guy if you go to market. Like you're gonna be like your only brand side experience is on the AB side. You've got to be able to prove that you can do it other places and you're not just you know, you're not really a product of the system, which is Anheuser-Busch. Because look, there's people who've been wildly successful before me and after me. So it's not like you got to be able to prove it's not just AB, it's you. So went to Verizon, learned a ton, and not necessarily the principles of like sports marketing. Learned a ton on more just managing an even more complex industry, but even in the fact that like we were there allowed to do business back. And I'd never been in a position where I was responsible for a P&L of, all right, you're spending X $100 million, but you are required to make back X $100 million. And that part for me was, if it was an awesome challenge. It also changed the dynamics of the conversations you were having with teams and partners because you would go into a conversation trying to coordinate and having spent time on the team side, I had an appreciation for how hard it was. You're trying to coordinate the COO or the CFO with the CRO with the president that very often they have conflicting agendas and not negatively, but the CFO wants to basically manage a P&L that is clean, profitable, where the CRO is trying to maximize revenue. But when you're looking at, hey, we need you to spend $25 million on a new digital antenna system for your new stadium, the CRO is like, great, I'm going to charge you this back to be the official. But the CFO is then diving in on like, how much are you charging me for that? Could I get it for less? And so it gets super complicated and it's
Yeah.
very, and I don't have to be the expert on all the technology. I just have to be able to facilitate the conversation and get everybody in the door and keep all lines of communication moving. But it was great. Like the same thing there. Like we did in the 2.5 years I was on that, we did about $250 million in revenue back from the teams.
Wow.
So like that part was you felt like you were driving value and not just marketing, but like true revenue back to the business to where like our CEOs, talking about big deals that we did on earnings calls and those types of things to where like it was really moving the business. And so
Yeah.
like that was great. And then, this spring, we spent a ton of time of getting this year we had a really ambitious Super Bowl where we did, 30 watch parties across the country in football stadiums and basketball arenas. And it was great, but it really was just kind of like not that there's nothing else I can do, but on the brand side, it was, I feel like I'd proven enough at a wildly different brand that my ambition to go start an agency, like there wasn't much more I was going to be able to do at Verizon to further show that I can do this in multiple places.
Yeah.
So, there wasn't, in having conversations with leadership, there wasn't another job internally I wanted. There wasn't, there's not another company I wanted to go work for. And I felt like I was prepared. So, I'm wildly not prepared to run an agency because I've learned a lot, but it's been fun, man. I think it's just been, all the uncertainty, all of the, selling yourself has been, challenging for me. I hate talking about myself, but there's moments where a good example is we've been talking to a client on Olympics and stuff we'd done 3 or 4 years ago with the Olympics and USOC. Like I'd forgotten how much we'd actually had done. So it's been kind of nice too to like pull on your experiences that you may not have like used in a while. And you get to work with a lot of wildly different people with different challenges. So that's a long-winded to say it's been a up and down and all over the place career.
No, hell yeah. And that's why I'm so excited talking, 'cause as people watching or listening just have heard, like you have a perspective of all these different experiences on both sides. Like it's almost like when you're negotiating with a property, perhaps like you know the tricks on both sides you're going to try to play. And not to say there's tricks, there's some of that, but some of those
Yeah.
negotiating tactics, some of the things that may look different than you may realize internally, like you know both sides, and that gives you a really unique perspective, certainly as well as the different sectors that you played in with between alcohol and beverages, and then certainly on the telecom side and connectivity side with Verizon. So much that like you've probably forgotten more than most of us will ever know about that space, but lots of real talk about here.
I'm trying to remember it.
But I want to even go back to sort of the beginning, almost the beginning, Nick, of as you started to develop your understanding, and certainly as the space has evolved throughout your career. Like when you were even at NASCAR, and you talk about like even the term business PR kind of like buzzed into my head a little bit about like, okay, what does that mean? And ultimately, like when you're thinking about how we think about success of partnerships, you mentioned that was very different at Verizon, where you were part of the P&L, and versus maybe AB, where it's just as much a brand play and all that as well, and making sure I'm in recognition. And at NASCAR, telling these stories of why you're successful, both from a metrics perspective as well as a kind of a perception perspective. So, how have you seen that sort of intermingling of perception of success and these more intangible, ROI type things versus a more rigorous, like, show me the data that this is performing the way you said it would?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like what I've realized, especially I think I was very siloed and focused on how we measure success at AV for so long that having taken a step back on the team side for a brief period of time is had seen different industries and how they measure success, and then even coming to the Verizon side, like I think that what I learned is that like you can't be so hamstrung on the way that you measure is the only way to measure, because I think that what we realized when I was at AB or even at the NASCAR side, that I'll use Verizon, just AB, just so I can confidently talk about the differences. On the AB side, it was very marketing heavy. Like we could never really tie it to direct sales. One, because it was super complicated, and two, it was illegal. Like I could never walk into Yankee Stadium and say, "Well, you're only selling 70% of the beer here is only mine, but I'm paying you 100% of the sponsorship revenue. What gives?" Like, or on the Verizon side, you could be very black and white. So like a lot of it was very marketing ROI driven, brand lift, social media engagements, a lot of the soft metrics, but they mattered. And look, the sports still are probably the number one, if not the biggest, marketing pillar or marketing channel you can have to drive brand awareness. Because if you can get a marquee asset, signage, activation, whatever, in a big market, like if you were an unknown brand, like you look at what SoFi does, you look at these naming rights deals for, trying to gain credibility, gain visibility. Like nobody knew who SoFi was before they did the stadium, and now it's huge. It's synonymous with like sports in LA, where when you're an established brand, your metrics change. Like it's just like you are trying to drive more like tangible results. Like on the Verizon side for us, a lot of it was business back. A lot of it was what is the value I can pass to our 130 million consumers. Like I've
Yeah.
got 130 million consumers. What do they get as a Verizon customer and a Washington Commanders fan? Like, is there 10% off the team store? Is there early access to tickets? That how we didn't really even take into consideration a lot of the soft metrics. They were there, but that wasn't really driving the immediate value back to us. But then we're helping a client now that has very low visibility. They just signed a jersey patch deal, and they're trying. I mean, their number one metric is awareness, and their number two is building their CRM. Like that is nowhere on the radar for a lot of the more established brands. But if you're a new brand, that is the most valuable thing you can do. So I think that when I was younger, I just assumed everybody wanted the same kind of cookie cutter, and like a little bit it was being naive. But the second part was too is, you gotta imagine 10 years ago, all of these sponsorship ROI companies were just kind of popping up saying they had the silver bullet to tell you if this is working. But the reality is it's kind of on the brand because like the metrics change. Like the other thing is that your internal objectives change. So if your ROI is not changing with your metrics, you're never going to be able to show the true value. And you need the partnerships to have the flexibility to change the ROI model with you.
No, it's a really considerate answer, and I love thinking about all the elements and how they can come together, and how it depends on where you are as a company, where you are as a brand,
Yeah.
and like, we talk about like assets, but it's really what are the goals you're trying to get? There's awareness, consideration, trialing, all that sampling, and direct sales, and B2B sales, and B2C sales, and lead generation, and all that as well. And so there's more than one way to think about success, and you have to understand what your measures are going to be and what your main goals are going into those conversations.
One of the biggest things right now that I mean, all of us understand there's a tremendous amount of value in is data, like first party data. I
Yeah.
think that what we're seeing though across the board though is what the end brand does with it is wildly different. Some are super sophisticated that they can drop it into their broader data pool or their CRM and start connecting dots, building models against the type of consumer profile. Others just drop it into an email blast and they just keep doing it that way. So like the value of the data is truly dependent on the company. It'll eventually become one of the most important assets of the teams if it's not already. But there's still value in some of the historical assets. Like I'm guilty of when I was at AB. I mean, we used to, poo-poo all over like outfield wall signs and things like that. That didn't work for us, but that matters to a lot of other people. And I think that, it's one of those things that the data piece is just, especially for companies that are DTC or they're literally just like they don't have any data. Like I'm speaking for like soft drinks, beverages, all those stuff. Because there's a tiered model out where they can't, you don't go direct to consumer
Right.
the ability to engage and get this consumer data that you can't get yourself becomes that much more valuable. But the hard part is a lot of the teams rely on, agencies like, more in the space of, the green flies of the world and others to basically build programs to build that CRM because the capability doesn't necessarily exist in-house.
No, it's a really good point there. And I mean, there's probably a whole other tangential conversation we could have. Maybe we will later of like where we're going with data clean rooms and being able to exchange
Yeah.
and kind of mix and mingle our databases a little bit. So that's an interesting area to watch for sure.
Yeah.
I want to also like again looking through all your perspectives and experiences of how we have sort of evolved in the last decade plus 2 decades even of going, yes, we still have, as you even mentioned, the old menu of assets, a very way back when there was it literally was a menu, had inventory, and you had, and it would cost this cost this, and then things came along, and now we have digital and social and content, and there really is there's no ceiling to the amount of content you can create and the amount of and the abilities, and let alone how we started thinking about how do you price this stuff, and what is this, how is this value versus this, and is every impression worth the same, is every what's an engagement, is every engagement worth the same? So as you, went on in your career, certainly at AB and then later on as well, how did this emergence of these intangible, like non-physical assets come about, and the ability to create content and understand what the value of content was to start to enter the fray, let alone how much it was supposed to be worth?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we kind of two-part answer is we were fortunate enough at both locations. So when I was at AB, I use the NFL as an example. We had 28 teams of the 32 when I was at Anheuser-Busch, and then at Verizon we had 22 or 23 of the 32. So what we ended up doing is create our own internal rate card. So we had, when a team came to us and said, "Well, here's the league average," and it's like, "Oh, that's cool," but like I've got 28 teams. I have a better league average than you do because I
Yeah.
have 28 contracts. I can tell you what I'm paying. And like, but again, it goes back to we also armed them with our rate card. We would just say, guys, like, I've got 28 teams. This is the blended rate we play, we pay for a social media post. This is the blended rate we pay for an email blast, all the way down to LEDs and you name it. We also know that there's variability off of like quadrants of New York versus
Right.
Memphis in basketball or whatever. But the reality also became too of that, the data that their owner is seeing wasn't necessarily the right data. Because look, when a team gives their report for the Sabre report, they're reporting as accurately as they possibly can. However, when you say that, AB is paying me $1 million a year, that may not be the case because it may only be 600, but then they bought a bunch of extra tickets and then they bought a suite and you don't want to be in last place. So you're saying the total commitment from AB is 1 million. Again, they're not doing anything wrong, but it becomes much more of the partnership itself may have been 600. So that's where we help educate the teams on like how we built it. And it was always a painful process, but like the second time around we did a contract or the third time, they understood like this isn't us being aggressive or cheap or unfair. It's just like we have a better perspective of what the marketplace looks like
Yeah.
because we own the marketplace. So that helped. I think that the bigger challenge became as new assets came online and we wanted them or we wanted to create them with teams. I think we both struggled to price them. Like it's like, hey, we want to come up with a content series for TikTok. Well, TikTok just started. We've never priced that out. And it's
Right.
just like, and then, or when we signed the deal, they only had 20,000 followers. And when the deal comes up, they've got 3 million. And it's just like, fair. So like I think it became a little bit more of like we do understand the rate card is a league informed baseline of how all the what teams charge, but not all teams are created equal. And honestly, the content the teams create isn't all equal. So there were teams like the Jaguars went out for a while that made amazing content, but their numbers didn't necessarily stack up in
Right.
terms of like reach and scale. But we would pay a premium for Jaguars content because the engagement was high. They did an amazing job. Like they listened and put the brand first, where other teams maybe had like tighter restrictions. So it is probably the most challenging part of the negotiation is the asset valuation across the back and forth. But I will say too is the hard cost is probably the non-negotiable. Like we understand that you have production costs. We
Mhm.
understand that like asking for two more tickets is a hard cost, like all these other things. But when you're telling me that email blast is worth $25,000, like I know the hard cost there is, whatever a graphic designer costs for two
Right.
hours. Like it's really like that's really where I do think the experience, at least from myself having time on the team side. I hired a woman when I was at AB, and we also had people when I was at Verizon who'd been on the team side to know that like this is the process to do this is minimal to nothing, where the process for a lot of the content was a lot more of a heavy lift. I mean, they've got to run it through legal, they've got to edit it 15 times. So we got far more sophisticated, but we also got, I would say, a lot easier to deal with because we understood it. So
Yeah. And even thinking about the data you do get back for the performance of that content, and some of it's going to be really strong data and it's going to be the exact target audience we want. And then some of it's going to be, well, yeah, you had 3 million views of your TikTok content, but how much of that was from some like random countries in South America that maybe we care about, maybe we don't. And so
we
that
got
element comes in too.
we fixed that problem. Like I would say, we moved to this variable compensation or incentive driven model in our
Right.
contracts. One of the things that we would put in there was we would have a social media or content series and we would put targets against it and you'd get 80, 90, or 100% of your deal or of the target number. Let's say we said $30,000 of incremental or incentive based on the baseline of the contract and it would be 10, 20, 30 for certain milestones, but it would be based on engagement or reach. And we've gotten super detailed in those contracts of like it had to be a combination of both. It couldn't just be in your market. We're doing this because you have a national fan base.
Yeah.
And then to your point, if all of a sudden I'm getting a bunch of clicks from Africa or Australia or other places, like that doesn't count because that does nothing for me. So we got to a point where we were incentivized together financially to create the right content series that hit the metrics. Because look, we always budgeted to pay 100%. So we weren't incentivized to like not have these, like to not lead these guys down the road to success. And it helped a lot. It was a lot of work. I mean, I think that that's probably the only piece is in theory, we probably had 15 to, I mean, in reality, we had 15 to $20 million a year at risk that was based in incentives. But, we fully expected to pay it. But it was time consuming and cumbersome to coach all the teams on like how to get to that successful metric. And it was
Yeah.
based on everything from the social media side. We even did it off of to avoid a good year. We did it off of attendance or championships, so they can just get paid their bonus now. So then when the renewal comes up, it's like, oh, we're more valuable. It's like, I already paid you for that. Like we already paid you for winning a
Yeah.
championship. But if you don't go to the if you don't, if all of a sudden you go from winning the NBA finals to not making the playoffs, like it's not like I have a chance to come back down. So it
Totally.
helped us in forecasting a lot.
No, that whole inherent risk is always fascinating, or the upside as well. Like all of a sudden, if you're Leicester City can win the Premier League at 5,001, and someone gets a partners get a great deal.
But what you think about it too, right? Is like, I mean, you could have 28 NFL deals, and all of them have varying Super Bowl championship bonuses in it. You've only got to basically budget for the one most expensive version because only one of them can win.
Right.
So well, that's where the reality for us is that we put it in everywhere, and you probably have one or two teams that if they won, great, but if they didn't win, somebody else won, there could be $100,000, $200,000 delta in like this team winning the Super Bowl versus this team. And I think that that's really where, and honestly, the bigger Super Bowl bonuses came for teams that you wouldn't expect to win the Super Bowl that like will happily pay for. Where at the time the Patriots were winning every year, there was no world we were ever going to put one in there because like it
Right.
was just kind of an accepted at that point that there was a high likelihood they were going to win, and we put in a bonus that was more like pay for the parade, pay for the championship marks, stuff like that.
No,
So
totally.
yeah.
I love the point you made, sort of like the idea of coaching and collaborating on content as well. And so I'd love to get your perspective. It's something that comes up a lot when I'm talking to people at teams, talking to people on the partnership side around, okay, we have this content series that we know is working, it's great, and we want to offer it to you. Or versus, hey, you're bringing us an idea, let's work together on it. And I think AB in particular, I've been a fanboy for years of the Bud Light Selly campaigns because it
Yep.
works so well across leagues, across teams, and so easy to replicate. And some of the other stuff is more bespoke and something that is integrating directly into what teams are doing. So when you're coming to a property, is it more like, hey, what's working right now? Like, what have you guys been doing? What's organic to your audience versus, hey, we have this idea that we want to bring to life with you, and let's work together on it.
Yeah, I mean, most times, like, brands are looking at, if they have a league sponsorship, they try to get some uniformity across like all their local partnerships so they can amplify it nationally. So it feels like a local team partnership can feel national and it doesn't feel hyperly local. So with like the celebration pro, like the Selly stuff we did, even all kinds of other like, hit the buds and things like that Budweiser does. And
Right.
on the Verizon side, it was like Verizon Access. We could show
Yeah.
Verizon Access moments across the country, amplify them nationally, and it would be relevant to you no matter what. But then we did have localized content about like behind the scenes or mic'd up or the phone call for the draft that the teams would bring to us as part of a partnership, or it just made sense to us from a brand perspective that we wouldn't necessarily try and replicate. However, if somebody had a great enough concept, we would take it and say, hey, next year we did this in this market, we want to do it everywhere. So we're going to kill the old whatever it was, and let's all lean into this because we saw a tremendous amount of engagement, whatever. But I do think that it works both ways. But to your point on like this, the partnership, like in communication of it, it's like nobody on the brand side ever goes into a deal like trying to think like I got to get as much out of this as possible because we're likely not going to renew. Like the brand side is overly incentivized because they have probably fought to get this deal. So they need to make it look like it's the smartest decision they have ever made it or recommended to their CMO or CEO
Mhm.
by getting a ton of value out of it and then ultimately renewing the deal because it was such a great investment. And most times when a partnership doesn't work, it's either one, a change of strategy, which the team can't help, or two, the brand itself didn't put the right resources to get the most out of the partnership. Very seldom is it that the team has not provided or been flexible enough for the brand to get the value out of it. Because like no team wants to go take any category back to market. So I think it becomes more of a lot of the communication has to come from the brand and the agencies to get to success because you having to justify why you spent X amount of dollars on a partnership and why that was a bad decision 3 years later is tough because it puts
No,
your job at jeopardy. But the other part is just that like, and oftentimes they'll blame the team. They'll just say the team, team sucked, team wasn't hard to work with, whatever it is. When in reality, either their plan when they originally signed the deal wasn't right, or the second problem really was it's just when the strategy changes, there's nothing anybody can do. Oftentimes, a new CMO comes in and said, that person like baseball, like basketball, like can't do anything about that.
yeah.
So but it's when you're in those brand roles, and I think that that's the one thing that we're counseling some of our clients on now is like, you fought for this, you fought for, or your CMO handed you this, or your CEO, you need to make it work. You're not in a position, and the teams should know that like they're in a position to make all of these deals work. And when they're being a pain in the ass and they're asking you for stuff, it's not because they're being selfish and it's not because they just, are trying to get more than they want. It's like they're trying to justify the expense they made, period.
Totally. I mean, then they all sides want to win. All sides want to do
Always.
well. Like everyone
Yeah.
wants to come out looking good, and we want to work together. And yes, there might be some competing goals at times. Not necessarily competing goals, but competing ideas of how to get there. But you ultimately want to, the best idea should win out, and the best results should win out.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that I had a boss at one point, and she used to say it well. It was like, she used to talk about both agencies and partners, and she's like, you get the value and you get the work that you deserve. So if you are a good communicator and a good partner, and you're like, a win-win type of mentality, like you'll get great work, you'll get great value, you'll get all that. But if you are a true selfish pain in the ass, or just like, blame of like, oh, it's the team or it's the brand team or it's finance, like you're gonna get what you get. So like I think that that's always been too, like I've tried, at least in most of my time across all these things, is like it is such a small industry. So like making other people look good makes you look good. And like there's not if you do anything truly like, selfish, like it'll follow you. Like there are still people I will not take a phone call from that, like, some of the stuff they pulled where it's just like I don't have any trust anymore. So like it's just, I think that that's one of those things that because it's such a small industry, like it'll follow you.
So key. That word trust, underline it, double click it, bold it, for sure. Just a few more stuff here with Nick Kelly, founder and CEO of Encore Sports Entertainment. Nick, I want to touch on a little bit of what you went into in your career path and thinking about starting Charlotte FC, like virtually from scratch, and what it's like building a brand, both in an emerging sport in the US, at least in soccer, and how you want that to stand out, and as well as what you're doing to build a brand that is going to be attractive to fans, attracted to the right kinds of fans, attractive fans, both young and old, and as well as like what things you put in place there. I mean, I remember, I think it was Charlotte FC that had like the chief fan officer that was super
Yeah.
compelling and interesting at the time as well. So what's like just going from 0 to 1, and like the kind of decisions you have to make and the kind of questions you have to answer, the kind of trade-offs you make as well.
Yeah, I mean, we were very fortunate because, look, I mean, our owner provided a tremendous amount of resources to be successful. So we hired fairly fast, and we prioritized like we kind of made like 10 big blocks. Like, all right, what are the things we can knock off and in what order? So it was, we had a brand, how do we get in the community? We had a bunch of ticket deposits from when we announced the team like 3 years earlier. So like, how do we convert those season ticket deposits into, actual like season ticket purchasers? The thing for us was we lost a ton of momentum. Announced the team in 2019, COVID hit, and then I started in February of 2021. So like there was a whole year of like, are we even going to do this? Is the team actually going to show up? So like that became the first challenge. However, like for us, it became like getting back in the community. I think that we had to like fight with everything else going on between in the Carolina markets. It's like Panthers and college football, basketball are 1A and 1B.
Yeah.
And soccer, while extremely, a big part of like the youth movement there, and they have some good college programs historically with men's and women's at like UNC and Wake and Clemson. I mean, there was a palpable value of, all right, this can be my team. Like this could be our first new team in 25 years. Like we can have all the new transplants to Charlotte, which is a growing market. It'll be great. But man, we pulled out every trick we could. We had pick a seat stays. We went to like every brewery within 40 miles and had pop-ups for like season tickets and giveaways. But we took every what normally would be a small moment and made it a big moment. So when we
Yeah.
like unveiled our jersey, Ally was an amazing partner and we invested tons of money in like having a jersey unveil party. We had a very steep, I would say, consumer perception because we were the first MLS team to do PSLs. And so we actually had to go out there and proactively state the value of that. But we lost a little bit of trust from, I would say, like our diehard supporters. So we created the chief fan officer role, which was a gentleman who, had a bunch of background and experience across WNBA, soccer, everything. And his whole job was to be the conduit between us and the supporters. And, some days we felt like he didn't work for us, which was, challenging, but that was his job. Like,
Right.
and look, we had so much, momentum and success in terms of like building it to where we still have the biggest MLS match ever, with 72 or 74,000 people. But we put very aggressive public stated goals out there. Like we said, we wanted to be number one in the league for the biggest match ever. We wanted to be number one in attendance. And, by doing that, it helped rally the team and the fans of like, all right, well, we want to be that too. So, we did have the largest match. I mean, we averaged number two in the league just because total capacity. Atlanta was built an amazing product in Atlanta. So we're probably seven or eight behind them. But being bold enough for us to state what success looked like, there was a lot of internal fights about it because they're just like, well, if you don't hit it, it looks like failure, even though it's successful. It's like,
Yeah.
but for us, it's like we needed something because we were just very much caught in an abyss of COVID going back, and all the schedules were all messed up too because I mean, you had basketball going on in the fall, you had all these other things happening, and
Right.
like for us, fighting for any airspace was tough. So learned a ton. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity. Like, and we did everything. We built community platforms. We sold season tickets, single game tickets, and I have now a tremendous amount of respect. Not that I did before, but even more so of like the ticketing world. Like it is so hard, and like we only had 26 games. The baseball, basketball, hockey side. Like, I mean, those guys. I mean, and the success of we were very fortunate with their expansion team. So demand was there no matter what.
Yeah.
But if you're stepping into a franchise that's 20, 30, 50 years old and they're not doing great and you're now the new head of tickets, like I have so much empathy and respect for like if you're able to turn that around.
Even within that though, even when demand is through the roof, it's like, okay, well, how much do we leave aside for singles versus selling a bunch of seasons, and where does premium come into play, and how do we make premium accessible but not too accessible? Like, there's so many questions that come into play there.
Well, and the other part is too is like, I was fortunate. There was a guy who was our CRO named Jake Burns who came from like baseball, and he was a good guidance as well as Tom of like, I wanted to move from season tickets to single game but before the turn of the new year. And they're like, you got to wait till 1 month out. And I'm over here just stressing because like even our initial match, like our inaugural match, like we're trying to do 74,000 people and we were sitting on let's call it 17 or 18,000 tickets and it's like how are we ever going to move it, but to their credit like they were right, like we didn't start selling single games until late January and then we were able to sell out the home match, the inaugural match. We sold, we averaged just over 30,000 for the regular season, and but because we relied on experienced people who've done this before. When you're sitting on a 20,000 base and you're only really looking between group sales and single game tickets to move a couple thousand tickets a game, it was far more approachable. And I think that it's just like that was the one thing that I was fortunate to have is had people who'd been through it before. So like I wasn't making dumb gut decisions off of like zero experience, but too proud to ask. Like I asked everybody. Like I called Jim Frivola, who just launched the Vegas Golden Knights. Like I'd called Atlanta, and they were amazing to deal with. Like anybody who launched a team, I spent so much time asking dumb questions because and look, I've offered the same, for the last couple of years to new MLS teams and WSL teams because like nobody wants anybody to fail. So like I think that it was just I'm pretty sure I annoyed a bunch of these guys though, because like I would just call and ask about the littlest thing just to make sure I wasn't like seeing it wrong.
No, totally. I mean, it's not everyone who gets to have the experience of starting a major league team from scratch. So it's really cool, something that you can take with you as well.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to too, like, as we look at, I mean, I look at the PWHL, the NWSL, even the W to some degree, and certainly newer teams that come up in the MLS or even USL and others as well, of what role partners can play in helping tell that story and beyond just we're gonna be we're gonna be an advertiser for you. We're gonna put our name on the billboard and pay you a lot of money for it. But how, like, I think Angel City kind of really made this special with their financial partners, even the Golden State Valkyries. You look at what Unrivaled is doing, of what role can or should partners play, and not just being an advertiser and a source of revenue, but being able to help tell your story and craft a narrative and creating experiences. Like, how have you seen that play out, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I think that the person and just the organization that has probably done the most in terms of stepping up and doing this is probably Ally.
Yeah.
We were fortunate to get to know Andrea and her team when I was in Charlotte, and their ability of one stepping up financially and supporting on the sponsorship side from PWHL, NWSL, WNBA, like they're front and center, and they don't just write the check and then walk away and hope the partners do it all. They're amplifying on their, traditional social media, above the line, everything. They're there. And they've done a great job of connecting the dots. So they don't just hand the NWSL a check and then like say, I don't have anything left for you broadcast partners or players. They've been able to close the loop. They're supporting the broadcast partners, and they're making demands in a very responsible way of like, we need to see this more on linear. We need to see this more in the right time slots. And it
Yeah.
really takes somebody with the right vision and the right brand with the right vision to pull it forward because it's, this commissioners of these leagues are in a tough spot because they want to drive as much revenue as possible to the league to then disperse out to all the owners. And then, obviously they want the teams driving their own revenue too. But when you get a brand like Ally who does like the full flywheel of every point, everybody gets a little piece and everybody's getting elevated, like it's hard. And I think that that's really where the Angel City guys and the Valkyrie have done an amazing job leaning into their local market and getting the local brands themselves with the amplification of the national to really drive not only the valuation but just the fan and customer experience there is like you feel it feels premium and it's not that much better than the next place, but the way they do it is so polished, it's so professional, and it's you feel like you're a part of the community and they've this invested on the upfront. And look, they were both successful before they ever played their first match or first game. So where like it's the upfront investment instead of hoping it comes along the way. And that's where I think you saw both of those markets invest heavily upfront. So once they actually had it, like they had a successful season before the season even started. They could have both those teams could have not been good on the field, and they were both actually great, and they still would have been successful because of the lead up to it was so well managed.
I think what's interesting too is it's almost like that feeling of consumers and fans being like, "Hey, they're in this with us. Like we all want to grow the league together, and now like they're supporting our league and helping our players grow. So therefore, we're going to support them." I mean, even going back to like I always like talk about this. Going back to NASCAR, NASCAR fans seem to have that same sort of like, "Hey,
Yeah.
this team, this brand is supporting my favorite driver." That's why NASCAR fans seem to have the most brand loyalty to partners compared to other leagues across the world.
Look, and that's one of those things like I learned early on in my career was like having worked at NASCAR is those aren't like fake stats. Like the brand loyalty, brand affinity, brand consideration, all of the things that matter from a brand perspective. NASCAR is probably the most effective buy you can have because it truly is the fans are smart enough and educated enough to know that like my driver may not be on the track unless, X brand McDonald's or, Shell Pennzoil, if they're not sponsoring Joey Logano or Darrell Wallace, he may not have a ride. So they value and appreciate that and they understand the business model of sports marketing more than maybe other brands do
Yeah.
because it drives the sport. And I think that that's why you still continue to see, I mean, the ratings have actually been great this year, but like regardless of how the sport's doing on attendance and ratings wise, the diehard fan base, which is huge, appreciates the sponsors more than any other sport.
Yeah, and there's something to be said too about like you mentioned it earlier around SoFi and establishing credibility. It can kind of work both ways. Where I look at like the Premier Lacrosse as an example. Like there was something special that started happening. I was like, okay, well they started out with mostly endemic partners, which makes sense. Your STXs and lacrosse brands, and all of a sudden they started getting these more blue chip brands, and
Yeah.
their credibility went through the roof. And vice versa too. If you are a big league and you're and just like you said with SoFi, a smaller challenger brand trying to get noticed by working with a big league, you get that sort of that halo of credibility. So it can work both ways, which is so super interesting to me.
Well, we weren't, and look, I mean, we weren't naive to the influence we had when we were at either one of those companies I worked at because we knew that if we came on to a league, early on, because we believed in it, it helped establish credibility for the league if you have, a Budweiser or a Verizon on board early. So, and it was just very much do we believe that this is one, good for us because we're hitting another audience? And two, do we believe they have the infrastructure in place to actually go and like drive even incremental value for us than we actually are investing in. Like we saw hundreds of presentations over the years from esports teams, and we did Drone Racing League for a while, all these other ones where it was
Yeah,
just like it meant a lot. And like for us, it became a little bit more. We got on the sales tour with them of like promoting like, well, why did you invest? And they would just say, hey, can brand X call you and tell you about what you're doing in our sport? And it's like, sure. Like so we became some, and oftentimes in these emerging sports, we became a little bit more of like an evangelist for why did you invest? So
yeah.
look, we felt that it was a privilege and also just like a responsibility of like, if we were investing here, we got to see that it works.
Totally. And even you're seeing some of the crazy stats around these unduplicated audiences. I think the Warriors and Valkyries, like it's like whatever, some very high percentage of fans for Valkyries don't cross over with the Warriors, and that's a big eye opener for those emerging leagues as well.
Yeah, look, and I think the one other piece too is that like you also one of the things we misinterpreted early on before we started doing surveys with like Panthers and Charlotte FC fans is like there was less than 20% overlap. like because it was a new audience, it was a younger audience, it was
Yeah.
clearly more diverse, and like the way we communicated to the Panthers could not be the way we communicated here, and it could be incremental both ways. If we could convert a Panthers fan to come to a game and a Charlotte FC fan to come to a game, it was a bigger pie for the total organization. But you look at the piece, and just to backtrack for a second, is the way that Kavakari and the guys in the Angel City FC did it was they every time they had like a astonishingly expensive number come out, like, hey, like this is how much courtside seats are or season tickets. Anywhere else in the country, everybody would be like, oh my gosh. But they were really smart about here's what you get as a customer here. Oh, we just signed a big player. Oh, we just got a big sponsor. Oh, we have a new like minority owner that, and I don't mean distraction in a bad way, but they had enough momentum, distractions like around the team that when the prices came out, you're like, oh, of course they are. This is a big deal. Like this is a real thing. Like so you were almost distracted by the fact that like you felt like you were buying into something of considerable value versus some of these clubs, they don't have the benefit of that. And, they just roll out season ticket prices. And the first thing that of course, you're going to get is like, that's expensive. It could be last in the league and they would say it's expensive. But like, they
Yeah.
did such an amazing job of like creating other moments and momentum and noise that was positive that when the prices came out that oftentimes are very challenging, they were ready for the headwinds. And they had fans being like, well, you get this or you get that. And like, man, they just did such a good job.
Yeah, and to almost take us full circle as we get to simple triple stat in a moment around that perception of brand and that like okay, it is worth that much because this is a big deal brand. It's not just some starter kit.
Yep.
That certainly comes into play. The last thing for you for simple triple stat, and I can keep you all day. I have so many more questions. But I want to give you the platform, sir. You just started Encore not that long ago, and you have a perspective now, and tell us like what are you looking at in the greater brand activation and sports entertainment space? Like what are the opportunities? What's missing? What's your unique perspective compared to others who are doing it out there? Like give us kind of your POV.
Yeah, look, I've been really fortunate over, the 10 or 15 years I've been working in the industry to work with amazing agency partners. I mean, pretty much if you can think of the top 10 or 15, I've worked with them at some point and I've learned a tremendous amount. And they've helped us and me personally be successful. I think that over the last 4 or 5 years, my last couple of years at AD and even at Verizon is, some of the stuff that I was looking for from the brand side was just, was some more partnership and like stuff that I think that only anybody can help you with who's been in your shoes. So like what I ended up doing while I was both at AB and at Verizon was building up my own network of peers that were, at the time it was Justin Toman at Pepsi or Frank Nakano at Chase, and when Bill, and then even now it's like Rob McQueen at Cisco and the Coke team and everybody else, and
Mhm.
our ability to compare notes because I didn't have anybody else to talk to. Like nobody had ever been through what I'd been through or was going through why my budget's getting cut. How do I go and sell this in? How do I rework these things? And from an agency perspective, it was just like they're all amazing, talented, well-rounded people, but because they hadn't been through what I've been through, like I didn't need a 15-page pretty deck. I needed 4 slides that were financially driven off of bullet points, like it looked like it came from McKinsey. And like that really is where like, we've been able to step in with both established brands that just need help with that. Like they may have an experiential or an activation agency that's doing all of the beautiful activations at football stadiums and Super Bowls across the world, but they need help selling in their 3-year plan, or they need
Yeah.
help like explaining to their new CEO how this works. And like, I think the other part about it is we're very conflict avoided. Like we are very clear, guys. We are only working with brands. We're not working with teams, leagues. We're not selling anything. So the opinion you get from us, the counsel you get from us is transparent. It's going to be very much what's best for you because there is no conflict. And I know that all the agencies, have a wall that they claim that they have up, but deep down, like, we always know that there is still risk there of, they're going to sell you their wares or they're getting pressure, it is what it is.
Yeah.
The other piece that's just been maybe unique to us is that we come in and say what we want to focus on and what we do well, and we would argue we're the best at, which is the brand consulting side, leveraging the teams to get the most value out of it. But if you're looking for social media content, or you're looking for hospitality, or you're looking for, something a little bit more specific where there are better people than us, we built kind of a network of like, great, here are the four content companies we would talk to for what you're looking for at varying price points. Here are the PR agencies. Here's everything else. And it's the transparency of we're not white labeling it Encore Experiential or Encore PR. Like,
Yeah.
if you want us to continue to lead it, great. But like, we want to be very transparent that we're bringing in the best that we think we can, that you deserve, versus you have to use ours. And I think that that model has been extremely well received because you don't have to pay for a PR agency or an experiential agency 365. We can just brief them on your behalf. Three or four of the best agencies out there will bring you ideas, and when you need it, great. And when you don't, you don't. So we're pitching much more of a leaner, efficient model of have some experienced executives counsel you 365, make you successful internally and externally. And then when you need something bigger and better, like we'll work with your other agency partners or we'll help you find it. So
Yeah.
it's been eye-opening. I know what I know well, which is like how to do the job. The agency world, though, man, it's cutthroat. I've learned a lot. Like, it's just I don't think I've been MF'd, and he doesn't know what he's doing behind my back in shorter period of time than I had in previous 15 years. So
Oh man. Well, at the end of the day, like as you mentioned throughout this interview, it comes down to trust, and you certainly have the expertise, and to be able to go to someone and say, "I've been in your shoes. I know what it's like, and I know what you need, and here's let's work together, and you can trust me because I'm transparent. We're open." I think it's a great starting point for sure as you make your way with Encore here.
no, I appreciate it. It's been fun.
But we're gonna have some more fun with you. Pick your brain a little bit more, Nick, with our quick hitting question segment, our second Encore segment. First episode, shareable stat coming up right now. Right back from this episode of Shareable Stat, and I'm joined once again by Nick Kelly. He's the founder and CEO of Encore Sports Entertainment. Nick, you crushed in your interview. Are you now ready for a second Encore?
Absolutely.
I am very proud of that name for the segment. All right, number one, we were actually just talking about a little bit about your time at Marshall, and so do you remember? I don't know if you were there for it or not, but do you remember the watching Byron Leftwich get carried down the field during that game?
Yeah, so I was on the team then. So I was there
Whoa.
from '01 to '04, and I was there for we're very fortunate my first 2 years that he was the quarterback because I mean we were top 25 every year, and he was special, right? I mean he was a great leader. He stuck around, played all 4 years, which is rare now. But man, that guy was different. He came back to the bowl game. Like he didn't have to. At that point, he was a first round draft pick, but man, he was just it's still one of the most impressive things I've ever seen.
What do you even think about or talk about when you see like linemen literally carrying him down the field? Like this is an incredible visual that will stick in your mind forever, I'm sure.
But it also goes back to the point too, is like he had enough trust from the coaches and everybody else that like they knew that they weren't going to get him out until like he absolutely and there it came a point after we scored the touchdown. I was like, all right, now I'm going to leave. Like so, like he didn't want to
Yeah.
lose. So
Oh, just so epic, and one of my favorite memories as well, watching football back in those days. Number two, I guess tell us about like how you describe your first timer experience in NASCAR. I know that I remember my first NASCAR race and how incredible it was, and also to a little bonus question, what do you think of the current state and outlook for NASCAR right now?
yeah, I mean, I remember my first race was I guess it was the October Bank of America race in Charlotte. It was literally my first week. So fortunately, I didn't have to travel anywhere. I just relocated to Charlotte. And man, I was just blown away about, on the business side, how long of a weekend it is. Because I mean, you
Oh,
have a truck race on
yeah.
Saturday, Friday, you had a nationwide Saturday, you had a Sprint Cup Sunday. But just man, the size and scale, like 100,000 plus people every weekend.
People coming in their campers and RVs and
100, and they're hanging out for days. Like they're not just showing up for like a 2 hour tailgate and walking in. Like they're part of, they're creating their own little community. So like, the power of sports for me really kind of like blew up at that point of just like how passionate they were. I will say that Steve Phelps and the team have done an amazing job of, what COVID did to the sport as a whole and then where they brought it back and the evolution of the cars and, the broadcast contracts. Like, it's one of those things that I don't know that it'll ever rival the NFL or NBA, but the fan base is still humongous. It's brand loyal, it's avid, and like they are doing a great job attracting a younger fan base. So like I credit a lot of my success in the sports industry just what I've learned from people like, John Schwartz and Brett Jukes and those guys when they were there because they were trying to be the start of a new brand, a new generation of NASCAR. And like I learned so much because we're selling on the heels of the high. So how do we, or
Yeah.
on the backslide is like, how are we trying to get it back just a flat line? So they've done an amazing job.
Super. It's always one of those sneaky things. I always tell people like you don't realize that yes, like, there's all these like sports that are on every week and competing for attention, but somehow NASCAR is still pulling in 2 or 3, 4 or 5 million viewers for races when they have so much competition, and it's like it's sneaky.
But even too, right, like if you go down to Daytona 500, like um, the amount of Fortune 500 CEOs there and the influential people that are literally there, beyond the Super Bowl and maybe the World Cup final, it is the place to be because it's just that like it's the one race that you as a brand want to go to. The facility is first class. And then when they do the pre-race like driver meeting and they announce all the CEOs, it takes 20 minutes to announce all
Yeah.
these people. So like it's impressive.
That's so great. Number three for you, Nick. I'm interested in this one. Tell me the partnership activation from a brand that you were not working with, or for that has most impressed you and why.
I'm blown away by the work that Amex does at US Open. It is such a big activation, like physically, like it's a large activation and footprint. They do it for 3 weeks. The amount of customers that they engage with, the way they lean into it, going into the months leading into it, how they amplify it coming out of it. Like to be able to sustain a premium hospitality like that, they partner with Momentum on it. Like they
Yeah.
do it so well. And it's been multiple years, and there's never really been a step back in the quality of it. Like, I mean, I know they probably invest a fortune in it, but like, it seems like they get the value out of it. And it's just,
Yeah.
it's hard enough to stand up a 1 or 2 day activation, but to do it for 21 days is, extremely impressive.
That's a great call. What is your perspective on the like big peak of like a 2 week activation like that, or even a 1 day type event, like a Super Bowl type event, versus the everyday hitting fans, like 162 games of baseball versus a one-off big event that might get people like in a big peak.
Yeah, look, I mean, picking on US Open, US Open, let's say has a million people. I'm sure it's more than that come through. Is the investment to set up one time and to have it run for the 3 weeks. There are some efficiencies there. I mean, not a ton, but like you're set up, you make the investment. You're not traveling around the country, so there's some value of making the setup, hosting a multitude of people, and oftentimes it's not. There is no season ticket holder for the US Open, so the likelihood of duplication of people coming through is probably fairly small.
Right.
The baseball, like baseball's a little bit hard. 80 home games. There is some value of establishing yourself as a proud supporting partner of the Orioles or the Mets or the Nationals. But the hard part about that too is effectively you sponsor that team. You're trying to build in as many of those costs as possible because for you to hire an agency or even your own team to go activate that many times is just cost prohibitive. So,
Right.
the only place that you can really see a lot of true activation is in the college and NFL space because 10 games, 7 games in college, like that's manageable. But the
Right.
hard part is like when you start getting into the basketballs, the hockeys, the MLBs of the world, you've got to pick the moments, and the moment has to make sense for your brain calendar and also for what's going on there. Like I'm not gonna pick on teams, but like if it's not a premier team coming to your home market and it's in the middle of summer in baseball, it may not be the investment like 2 weeks later when the Yankees or the Red Sox are coming and all this or the Dodgers, and next thing you know, like it's sold out because the quantity of people is just going to be dramatically different.
Yeah, and especially for those longer season sports, now I mean, the whole, I hate using the buzz term, but the eventizing of how do we create the more marquee standalone events that feel like they're bigger so we can sell it to a Netflix as well and all that.
Oh, yeah, look, and I mean, I mean, we did when I was at Verizon, Total by Verizon did a partnership with the Jake Paul promotion group
Mm,
and MVP, and we did it with Amanda Serrano, and it was super quick, and it was very just like, and I'll give their sales team a ton of credit. This guy named Keith Wan did amazing. He was just like, hey, you're a cell phone company. Amanda's never had a cell phone before. But she basically, if we're willing to give her first cell phone and it's a Verizon total by Verizon, like we shoot content, like will you help support? It's like all day.
yeah,
And our ability to build a relationship authentically, literally within weeks before the fight, activate in Dallas, do all this other stuff, like it really is just like that activation started from nothing to it was a nationwide activation for us heading into our next fight at MSG. So like it can kind of come out of nowhere.
oh, it's so cool. I love that anecdote. Number four for you, Nick. Tell me your AB InBev drink of choice. What drink you got? And then also a little bonus follow up on that. As an AB InBev employee when you were there, what kind of discounts, free product did you were you guys entitled to?
Yeah, my favorite still is Bud Light Platinum.
Mhm.
It's to 6% Bud Light. It just tasted smoother. I mean, we had the marketing stick was it was triple filtered and it was just great. I personally enjoyed it. It had a little bit of a sweeter taste. And the marketing benefits were amazing. I mean, the product. We got 2 cases a month when we lived in St. Louis, and then when we relocated to New York, we got a couple $100 a month through I think it was Drizzly, where you could basically buy products. So you were never for need when it came to like providing it. And the other part is when we had new products launched and we had a lot, they usually send you 1 or 2 cases to like give to friends. So like there was never a shortage of product.
Oh, it's so cool. I'm sure everyone always wanted to be at your house on the weekends and get access to
And
that
we
kind
would give it, and when you left, you'd be like, "Here, take this." So it was nice.
of. Oh, that's great. Number five, this is gonna be a fun one here. Tell me your most memorable or favorite pro sports event that you've ever attended.
Oh man, I mean, I guess it's timely. Is the Cubs Indians Game 7 in Cleveland? So, which is
Oh
fortunate
yeah.
enough, like myself and some of our coworkers when I was AB, is we basically drove from New York to there, day of the game, went to the game, rain was awesome. But like just the overall energy and it being historical and everything else was awesome. We had some content lined up. It was the first time we'd ever made, at least when I was at AB, like culturally relevant content that was timely. So we had worked with the team at Vayner to create a Harry Carey voicing the
Yeah,
World
I
Series
remember that.
championship and it was awesome, but it was like so contingent on like them winning. And so selfishly for us, we invested a lot and we really loved the content, but it was like they had to win. So it was kind of like the hey, great for the Cubs and the Cubs fans, but also for us, like it helped really change our marketing strategy because of the success and the engagement of the content that we created there. We went on to create countless amounts of pieces of content around Derek Jeter, Dale Jr., Dwayne Wade, that like was because of that. And so the game itself was historical, but it also truly transformed how we were doing partnerships and activation on the Anheuser-Busch side.
It's so cool, and it's really incredible that such a big brand can be that nimble and take that risk too. I mean, high five and go Cubs, run the ad. Like,
Well, man, it was a hard sell because we'd never done anything like that, and it was just like you're making a proactive investment and that is not cheap and shooting and finalizing content. And then we had probably 30 seconds of a 2.5 minute video that we shot live, like from all the bars and stuff like that around the city. But we'd already sunk a bunch of costs on the front end. So like it really was just like, it was a big gamble. It goes back to like, your job's always on the line type of thing. Like we convinced them to invest a couple $100,000, and if they lost, it just we light it on fire. So like that was a very, oh, I mean, we got very lucky.
yeah,
So
it paid off for sure. I mean,
yeah,
we can get into it today. There's a whole other conversation probably around like generative AI and real and that kind of stuff as well. As that we'll save that for our next episode, Nick.
yeah, no kidding.
Next question for you. Tell me, we went into this a little bit in the interview. Tell me the most important lasting lesson or key takeaway you'll take away from your time as a CEO in pro sports with the Tepper Group.
Yeah, look, I think the biggest one, and this is, your coworkers, your boss, your fans. It's just like, and I've heard it from like 5 or 6 different people, so it's definitely, something I think resonates. But like the whole like, you build trust in drops and throw it out in buckets. Like it's just, it does. It takes times and, piece by piece and bit by bit, you build up trust over, deals you do, meetings you have, presentations and transparency. But one screw up, like, you're starting from scratch if you're even given the chance to start over. And I think that that's really where it's just, trying to express, no matter how young somebody is on my team or within the industry, is like, the transparency is the number one thing that, usually will set you free of like, even if it's a bad decision, like you doing it in the most like, transparent way that this is why I'm doing it or whatever. If you fail or, screw somebody over, at least there is some like authenticity to it versus, covering it up, or doing it maliciously. Like, so the trust side, like, I feel like I've been able to move up within an organization or around the industry because of trust and transparency. And look, I mean, it's just not everybody's believes in that. Like, and it's an
Yeah.
aggressive, this is a young woman, young man's type of game when you're in your 20s and 30s, selling, pushing hard, traveling to events. But there's a reason like why it all kind of like I wouldn't say falls off a cliff, but like the amount of people who stick around 40 and plus is because like, you're either exhausted because this is a very hard industry on the team side, or it's just that like, your ability to build up that network is hard. And it is like, it's hard to carry the trust. And sometimes it's out of your control. But I can if you can protect anything about with your career, it's gonna have to be just the character and trust that you establish because without that, like your ability to get the next big job is almost impossible.
Really, really good advice that it hits home, and I'm taking that to heart for sure. So I appreciate you going into that. All right, next question for you, Nick. Come down the wire here with Nick Kelly of Encore Sports Entertainment. Tell me, we talked a little about this, offline before we started recording. Even what's kind of your POV on the narrative and the data of younger generations and even current generations not consuming alcohol like they did, several decades ago, or even a decade ago.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? Like I don't know that we've ever seen like a curve like this, and I think it really is just everybody's being more health conscious. There's a lot more information out there about everything we eat and drink. It is that whole generation of people who are just truly they have alternatives. A lot of them are even outside of taking their health, they can do cannabis products. They
Right.
can, their ability to, and even nicotine from like pouches and stuff is at a higher clip than it used to be. So there's a lot more alternatives out there. I think that the beverage industry has done a great job of pivoting to, all right, non-alcohol or low alcohol to continue to try and take that. Like I think that it's gonna not be a trend that goes away, but it's also there's people adapting. You see what High Noon and Surfside and even AB and some others are doing to like find like, all right, what is a lower calorie spirits based version of a cocktail that I can make that is accessible, easy, low sugar, low calories. So it's challenging, but look, it always evolves. Like when I started 10 or 15 years ago, like cider was a big thing. Nobody talks about cider anymore.
Yeah.
Like craft beer was booming, and now craft is like, tons of craft breweries shut down every day now. Like, and I think that it really becomes like we're seeing the evolution of ready to drink cocktails, so spirits based or malt based.
Mhm.
And then, you and I have talked about it briefly. It's like I truly do believe there's a world where like these cannabis infused beverages are going to become more and more attractive to leagues and teams as they become further regulated because it's a new category and everybody's pressured to grow revenue. And if you can create a new category that, the traditional spirits and beverage companies don't play in, and you're now create a brand new clean vertical, I mean, it's, sky's the limit. So
Oh,
it
yeah.
will be a little bit harder because it's not national. So they're not necessarily the funding there to go get like big deals. But your ability to cobble together a THC and a CBD based drink in your market, you see colleges like Louisville doing an amazing job, but
Mhm.
it'll become one of those things that like it could be extremely lucrative, in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, I remember maybe my last job, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago now, where the Las Vegas Lights, USL team in Vegas, were like made big news. They were one of the first like brands to connect with a partner in the cannabis space, and it's like, oh, is this the beginning of the next wave? And it didn't quite hit then, but it could be hitting soon.
Well, that's also too, right? You look at what the MLB I give them a ton of credit. They did Charlotte's Web, was that I think what it was called? So
Yeah,
like they had that CBD deal. Like I think that there's an appetite there. It's just gonna have to be like, can they make it make business sense for themselves? Like, because I think that these deals aren't cheap, and do you have enough upside and distribution and honestly product to sell that if you took out an outfield wall sign for the Colorado Rockies, can you meet the demand? If all of a
right.
sudden it's like, oh, I want to try that. Like the production's not there, the scalability is not quite there where it needs to be. If, in best case scenario, all of a sudden there's a huge demand because they saw you on national TV and they want to buy your product and like it's not available, it's kind of wasted at that point financially.
Totally. No, and even to segue to our next question, I remember like when you and I were in college, like we didn't think about how many calories were in a beer. We just drank it. So that segues to our next question, our food question. Tell me the best meal to get in New York and where to get it, and also a little bonus. Tell us about your best barbecue experience down in Charlotte.
Oh man, so barbecue is a lot easier. There's this place, Midwood Smokehouse. Man, I love that place. I was back in Charlotte last week, went twice. It's like it's been there for a while. They have the mix of normal barbecue stuff, and then they come up with like, you know, barbecue Mexican versions of tacos and everything. Man, it is the one place when people come to town. I don't know if you care if you're looking for formal or fun. Like that's always the place I recommend. And in the city, like my go-to for every meal is kind of like when people are like, "Where should we meet?" Is this place called the Smith? Like they have like 7 or 8 locations across the city, but it's kind of American bar fare, nothing super fancy, but it's a good vibe and it's affordable. So yeah, I'm pretty basic. It's just like I don't need the super fine premium dinner. It's just I'll take the barbecue at Midwood and the Smith in New York, and that's easy enough.
You and me both. I will meet you in Charlotte and we'll get some barbecue. That sounds right up my
Love it.
alley. I love that. Number nine, coming down the wire here, last couple ones, quick hitters. Tell me when you were in any of your jobs, really, the specialized software app. So not like Slack or PowerPoint, the basic stuff. What's kind of a sneaky, really helpful, like secret tool, secret weapon software app that you found really helpful?
My last job at Verizon, because data was so important to us, we worked with this company called Distinct, and it was basically a back-end data platform for us to be to, as it's really hard to get built into a large organization, is like direct CRM into within an organization. So we were able to use them to show so much greater value on the team side
Wow.
by getting them directly into our CRM database and their ability to educate us too of like, hey, here are the questions you should be asking. Here's the data points you should need to help supplement what you already have. And I think it's just like, and I became like an ambassador to everybody else. It was just like I literally was just like calling friends at Coke and other places, being like, everybody keeps talking about data, like this will make you look smart. And I think it was just because like they were small and I felt like I had like an in, so I helped a ton, right? Because I could just basically go to like my peers and say, you guys should try this. Because look, we all have the same handful of services. We all use Sponsor United. We all use, the Greenfly on the social amplification side, and a lot of us are using core. So like you got three core like assets that we're using, but this was like I was like add this to your portfolio because on the brand side, like you oftentimes rely on the agencies to run this for you, but there's probably 20, 30 brands who want to own it themselves. So like it was just and it helped us internally to further validate the investments we were making. So
Really love that. It's almost like I can almost see you like talking like a band you discover in a side stage or something. Like I'll look at Prog Hunt sometimes and be like, oh, am I gonna discover something that no one's really found yet? And I get to display it, show it to all my friends or all my peers, and
that's what it's exactly like. Yeah.
I love that. Last before you hear Nick, tell me either a recent or upcoming or active partnership or client project, whether you can talk about directly or speak anonymously that you're particularly excited about right now with Encore.
Yeah, look, I mean, one of the things we've been at least transparent about is like we've been helping this company called Game Seven. So they are
Mark
Mark
Messier.
Messier
Yeah.
and Matt and Ike founded basically a entertainment company that has apparel. They did a content series with Connor Shell and everybody for Amazon.
Yeah, I
They
watched it.
recently took on the Jersey partnership with the Rangers, and it's been extremely rewarding because they have such a strong foundation of founders, but also too they know what they don't know. Like we're helping them navigate, a complex partnership with MSG plus the Rangers and helping them get, they're all about brand awareness and CRM and
Yeah.
revenue. And it's just like it is the right mix, but it's also like the opportunities are endless because they own the Game 7 IP. They're in content now. They could be in collectibles. They could be in all these other things. And so like it's been a really fun a client for us to look to challenge us too, because it's not like take some of the other people that are established and they're just like, hey, help me with this. This is much more of a open-ended, what else could we be pushing on? So it's been
Yeah.
super fun.
No, that's a really good one. I love those brand names that can like become part of the everyday vernacular like organically by accident. Like you're gonna say the words Game 7 just in regular conversation, and if you get to the right point with that brand awareness, all of a sudden now every time you hear the phrase Game 7, you're gonna think about that brand, and that's a really cool singularity to get to, I guess.
Well, it is, and everybody kind of knows what Game 7 stands for if you're a sports fan. So, it's like the pinnacle of performance, it's high pressure, and it's like, it's historical moments, good and bad, depending on which side you're on. So, like, it really has just been like, the amount of opportunities that these guys are seeing because, there's a lot of teams and players who have that has made their career. So,
Yeah.
like, or made so it's been so much fun.
Love it. Love hearing about it. Been really cool to follow it, and certainly will continue to do so as well. Nick, you crushed your second encore. The crowd is still
We
cheering,
did.
hoping for a third one on standing ovation. Now your chance to take over the podcast and tell us your all-starter follow. It can be a newsletter, a podcast, a blog, a Twitter follow, and a LinkedIn follow, whatever it is. Just tell us who they are and why they're following.
Yeah, man, this guy named Jordan Rogers. I don't know if you follow him or not. Man, I feel like I know a lot about the industry as a whole, but then, his perspective, and he has a podcast called, was it Brand Fathers, that, just more being in the apparel and the performance space. Like I realized that, having worked on the brand side of a sports marketing agencies and stuff like that, we weren't endemic to the sport, the way that some of these apparel companies are, and just their thoughts of how they look at athletes and how they look at just like the sales cycle. I mean, I listen and consume a lot of his content every day, and then more importantly, it's just like even his TikToks, which are snackable, which is just
Yeah.
like, hey, here's a new, Sunday Red, and here's my opinion. Like it's and the way he does it just feels like it's not like he's talking down to you, like it's like he's the smartest. It's very, very well positioned. So like he's a fun follow, if anything. Like I've learned a ton just about like how they dealt with athletes in the past. So that would be my recommendation because I have probably the same thing you have, Neil, which is like I have the same 3 or 4 newsletters that everybody gets, and they're all great for different pieces. But his is just completely different than anything else I follow.
That is a great, great shout out. Even though the first few times I could encounter him, I kept thinking he was Aaron Rodgers' brother, Vanderbilt quarterback. Nope, it's the other Jordan Rodgers. So that's a good
Yeah.
one. And how about you, Nick? Where can we find you as well as all things Encore across the web, digital, social?
Yeah, I mean, we're at Nick Kelly's on LinkedIn. Feel free to, I mean, easy to get a hold of. And for us, I mean, we're trying to be a little bit of the old CAA model. Is if you know how to get to us, you get to us. Like we're not going to go out there and post jobs and promote a lot about what we're doing. We want to kind of basically is be word of mouth because
Yeah.
it's all about elevating our clients and everything else. But we're at EncoreSportsAndEntertainment.com. Like we're out there.
Check them out. But more importantly, just cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast today, Nick. Really learned a ton and enjoyed our time together. And thanks so much for coming on and best of luck going forward with Encore.
I appreciate the opportunity, Neil.
Just a phenomenal opportunity to chat with Nick Kelly of Encore Sports Entertainment. Cannot thank him enough for all of his time, all of his thoughtful responses. And I learned a ton today. I took a ton of mental and real physical notes. I hope you did too. Listen back again. Just so much good nuggets in there. Such good stories and anecdotes, examples, practical advice, practical insights. Cannot thank Nick for coming on the enough for coming on the podcast today, and certainly keep an eye out for what he's doing with Encore Sports Entertainment. He brings a ton of knowledge and experience to the table, and he's already doing some great stuff with their clients there, as you heard about a little bit today in the interview. But that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for watching or listening. You can find me, your host, Neil Horowitz, on LinkedIn, also on Twitter, NJ287, the website, dsmsports.net, the podcast, wherever you like to find your podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, etc. Until next time, this is Neil Horowitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.